2023 is coming to a close, and it was an interesting year for movies. So many big-budget films came and left with a whimper, and others, like Barbie and Oppenheimer, dominated the year's movie discussions, Oscar rumors, and the box office. But this video isn't about box office numbers or Oscar predictions. This is about me listing my 10 best movies of the year. These are the movies that either left the biggest impact on me or simply entertained me the most. There were quite a few movies in 2023 that either just barely missed my top 10 list, or movies that I unfortunately didn't get a chance to see yet. So if you don't see some of your favorite movies of the year in this video, let me know in the comments what you liked. I'd love to see your top 10 lists as well. Now without further ado, let's start at number 10. Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I have to admit, I wasn't expecting to like this film at all, but it took me completely by surprise. I've never played D&D in my life, so I knew nothing about it going in. The trailer gave off the impression that there would be an overdose of forced MCU-like quips, and the writing team even made comments about emasculating their leading men. All the red flags were there for me. So imagine my surprise when I get a film that's legitimately funny, heartfelt, and exciting. The cast, led by Chris Pine, play off each other really well. I especially loved his friendship with Michelle Rodriguez's character, and his quest to revive his wife and reconnect with his daughter make him really easy to root for. Justice Smith's character seems to be the emasculated one, and weak at first, but they give him a really nice arc where he learns how to be strong and confident. While not all of the jokes land, most of them do, especially the ones where they're in a graveyard trying to ask all the dead soldiers for information. They're only allowed a certain amount of questions each, and this leads to a lot of hilarious moments.
What's 2 + 2? I'm bad at math.
There's a big decision Chris Pine has to make at the end that warms your heart and rips it out at the same time. It's set up really well through foreshadowing and completes his character arc in a really emotional and satisfying way. I also enjoyed the imaginative settings and costumes. Dungeons & Dragons is goofy, but emotional in a way that gave me the same feeling I had when I watched the first Guardians of the Galaxy in 2014. It was a fun movie with memorable moments and characters. And speaking of Guardians of the Galaxy, number 9, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I've been very critical of the MCU as a whole this past year, but Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was a solid film by James Gunn. He closes his trilogy out in a satisfying way, and it's clear that he loves every single one of these characters. All of the main Guardians wrap up their respective arcs, the villain is genuinely threatening and easy to hate, and Rocket's backstory packs a huge emotional punch. Even though most of the audience probably knew where Rocket's flashbacks were heading, it was still so heartbreaking to see what he endures and what becomes of his friends. The scream he lets out in this scene holds so much pain, and I have to credit Bradley Cooper for bringing so much emotion and humanity to a talking CGI raccoon. I also like Star-Lord and Gamora's back and forth throughout the course of the movie, and I especially like that they never became a couple. She isn't the Gamora he knew, and it's nice to see him finally heal from his past trauma over losing her. The action and humor are, as always, on point. Like with D&D, not every joke lands, but most of them do. The worlds and characters are creative, and it has many great emotional payoffs involving every major character. There were several different moments in my theater where I heard sniffling throughout the crowd. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 wrapped up a solid trilogy. While I don't think it was quite as polished or efficient with its storytelling as the original movie, it was still good enough to make my top 10 list for this year. Number 8. Tetris. This was quite a year for video game-themed movies and shows. Tetris is based on the true story of Hank Rogers and his mission to help license and patent the iconic video game from Russia during the Cold War years. It's an Apple TV original, and a movie that really seemed to fly under the radar. It stars Taron Egerton, who gives a dynamic and charismatic performance. The first parts of the movie are pretty straightforward, where we learn about Rogers and his early negotiations with Nintendo. The movie progresses and starts to have elements of an espionage thriller. Rogers, and by extension his family, face genuine danger, but he's determined to make a deal, provide for his family, and protect his new friend Alexei, the original creator of Tetris. The soundtrack is great, giving us Russian and Japanese versions of recognizable pop songs. Tired of hearing Bonnie Tyler's I Need a Hero in every single movie? Well, here's the Russian version. Enjoy. I also like the way they incorporate video game graphics throughout the movie, including Tetris blocks and 8-bit models that introduce the characters. While it's not directly a video game movie per se, it has a clear love and respect for gaming, and that really shines through here. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely check it out. It's a fun and exciting film that you should block out some time for. Number 7. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. This franchise seems to get better with every movie. After taking the cinematic world by storm last year with Top Gun, Tom Cruise is back with more epic stunts in Dead Reckoning Part 1. It has everything you'd expect and hope a Mission Impossible movie to have, with all the cool gadgets, disguises, and larger-than-life action scenes. The AI elements of the story are chilling, especially considering how prominent it's become in our own world. The part where the AI program imitates Simon Pegg's voice to send Cruise in the wrong direction actually gave me goosebumps. The entire cast is great as always. Tom Cruise proves to be an ageless wonder, and Haley Atwell is a fantastic addition. She's smart, savvy, and has great screen chemistry with Cruise. Between Atwell, Rebecca Ferguson, and Vanessa Kirby, there is an overload of fine in this movie. And of course, I have to talk about the action. Ferguson has a great sword duel against our main baddie, and I love the epic train sequence in the third act. But the highlight for me was the chase in Rome, which might be the best car chase I've ever watched in a movie. Although this movie is a part 1, I think it stands pretty well on its own, and I for one can't wait for part 2. Number 6. Spider-Man: Across the Spiderverse. Into the Spiderverse was mind-blowing when it came out in 2018. It had a killer soundtrack, an emotionally resonating story, and a revolutionary style of animation. It had the look and feel of a comic book, with creative artwork and stunning action sequences that could only be done with animation. It was such a well-done film that I didn't think the sequel would be able to top it. And then, it did. Across the Spiderverse does everything that a great sequel should do. It continues the story, expands the world, adds memorable new characters, and raises the stakes on both a personal and multiversal level. The animation steps it up even more from the first movie, with each setting having its own unique look and art style. Spider-Gwen's world in particular sticks out to me. Each of the characters are older and face newer challenges and struggles. The villain gradually goes from being a joke to a legitimate threat. The concept of canon events was brilliantly weaved into the story, and I love how Miles is strong enough to reject his pre-written destiny. The main gripe people have had with this movie is that it's clearly meant to be one half of a full story. It ends on a massive cliffhanger, and it leaves you wanting a lot more. I didn't have a problem with this personally, because I realize that it's a big enough story to cover 4 or 5 hours, and I'm definitely invested enough to wait and see what happens in the next part. Number 5. John Wick 4. John Wick 4, like the other films in the series, is light on story, but heavy on action. That being said, it has just enough story to justify each action sequence. As far as the action sequences go, this is the biggest and most ambitious John Wick film yet. The 3 major acts of the movie take place in Osaka, Berlin, and Paris, and every bit of it was thrilling and stylish. Keanu Reeves is brilliant as always, using his real-life firearm and martial arts skills to play a convincing action hero. The addition of Donnie Yen as a blind assassin was so damn good, and I loved all the creative ways that he was able to fight. No 2 action scenes felt the same, as we get a variety of shootouts, hand-to-hand combat, car chases, overhead shots, and of course, the stairs, which felt like that endless staircase from Super Mario 64. I also really love Scott Adkins' character as the head of the German table. His over-the-top look and line delivery made for a fun antagonist. While John Wick 4 isn't as emotionally resonating as the original movie, I think it has the best action sequences. When it comes to pure spectacle, John Wick 4 is hard to top. Number 4, The Sound of Freedom. This film is an emotional powerhouse. It's based on true events and it follows Tim Ballard, a former government agent who sets up a sting operation to rescue children from a trafficking ring in Colombia. There was apparently some controversy surrounding this film, with some critics calling it exploitative, conspiracy-fueled, and a right-wing fever dream. But The Sound of Freedom isn't a political or agenda-driven movie whatsoever. It simply shines a light on an ugly reality of our world, and it tells the story of a man's determination to do something about it. Tim Ballard has many chances throughout this story to say, "I've done everything I can do," and get back to his family safely. But he keeps persisting, telling himself, "I can do more," every time an obstacle is presented. What I liked about this movie is how grounded and realistic this mission is. He doesn't go in guns blazing like Liam Neeson in Taken. He's smart and strategic, and the film does a great job at showing you how he gradually puts together the pieces for this plan. The pacing of the movie is also well done, and there's always just the right amount of tension in every scene, as there are several different ways that Ballard's plan could go wrong, keeping the audience on the edge of their seat. It's impressive to see a movie that can provide this level of tension without relying on a bunch of fighting and gunfire. And, as others have pointed out, the film is very careful in what it does and doesn't show with its victims. It never crosses the line where it becomes exploitative. The scenes when the children are captured are hard to watch because we know that this wasn't something made up for dramatic effect. It's a tragic reality of our world. The performances aren't at the level of something like Oppenheimer, but they're still really good overall. Jim Caviezel carries the movie well, but Bill Camp was the standout for me. He plays a reformed cartel member who helps Tim Ballard out. The monologue where he talks about his past and why he chose to fight against child trafficking is one of the most powerful moments in the movie. The actress who plays the little girl also gave a great performance. The opening scene shows her singing and playing her drums in her room without a care in the world. The closing scene of the movie has her back in the room after going through hell. She hesitates, knowing that she will never be the same, but still ends up singing and playing once again. The subtle expressions that she emotes in the scene are really impressive for a child actor. The Sound of Freedom tackles some tough subject matter in a way that's grounded and emotionally resonating. And it left enough of an impact on me to make my top 10 list for this year. Number 3, Oppenheimer. Christopher Nolan has proven time and time again that he's a master of filmmaking, and Oppenheimer is no exception. Some of you may have seen my Barbenheimer video from back in the summer. I heap a lot of praise onto Oppenheimer in that video, citing that it deserves to win several Oscars, but admittedly I also expressed some disappointment in it, likely because my expectations going into the theater didn't quite match what I actually got. That being said, I've been able to watch it again and reflect on it a lot more, and perhaps I treated it too harshly. My general critiques of the movie do still stand. I think the pacing is a little inconsistent. The third act really makes you feel the 3-hour runtime. There's more telling than showing throughout a lot of the dialogue, and it didn't capitalize on as many potential emotional beats as it could have, in my opinion. But despite all that, it's still a brilliant film, and undoubtedly one of the best that came out in 2023. It goes without saying that it's got a stacked cast, and all of them, primarily Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, and Robert Downey Jr., give incredible performances. The practical effects and sound mixing are top-notch, and the scene where they test the bomb was one of the most gripping and immersive moments I've ever had in the cinema. Seeing it in IMAX was absolutely worth it. Dr. Oppenheimer himself goes through a lot of internal turmoil, and the movie does well at not portraying him as some all-American war hero, but as a morally ambiguous figure who felt tormented by his own creation. I mentioned in my video over the summer that one memorable scene showed flag-waving Americans cheering him on as he's about to give a speech. He suddenly gets horrific images in his mind of death and destruction, and the scene does such a good job at showing us his internal landscape in such a short amount of time. It's something I wish Nolan would have explored a little more in Act 3. Oppenheimer's final scene with Albert Einstein is also bone-chilling, and delivers a warning that wasn't just for the days following World War II, but a warning that remains applicable today, and it proved to be one hell of a way to end this movie. Oppenheimer has a good chance to win Best Picture at the Oscars, and I think it deserves it. However, there are 2 more movies on my list that I enjoyed even more in 2023. Number 2, Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. This is easily one of the most underrated movies of the year. Starring Jake Gyllenhaal and Dar Salim as John Kinley and Ahmed, it's a story of war, survival, rescue missions, and in the heart of it all, a friendship between a Green Beret and his interpreter. The acting is superb. Gyllenhaal gives a great performance as always, but Dar Salim steals the show as the interpreter Ahmed. He's someone that Kinley isn't sure he can trust at first, especially after learning that he'd been affiliated with the Taliban in the past. But Ahmed's motives are simple. He wants to provide for and protect his family. The cinematography and musical score also adds so much to the film, especially during the scene where Ahmed carries a wounded Kinley over the mountainous terrain. Kinley is safely returned to the States, but Ahmed is left behind. You can feel every bit of Gyllenhaal's desperation as he tries to find a way to rescue Ahmed and his family. He decides to go back himself with help from private military contractors, and this is where the tension and danger are cranked up even higher. I don't want to give anything away from here, because you just need to watch and see what happens. Ahmed is the heart of this movie, and his character's bravery and likability get you fully invested on what happens to him at the end of the movie. While this film isn't directly based on a true story, it was inspired by stories about all the brave Afghan interpreters who stood against the Taliban. It ends on a somber note with the reminder that hundreds of these interpreters were killed during the Taliban's military offensive in 2021, and thousands more are still in hiding. The characters, story, message, acting, and cinematography are all brilliant, and if you haven't seen The Covenant yet, I highly recommend it. It was my top-rated film throughout the majority of 2023, and I was fully prepared to put it at the top of my list. But then, in December, I saw my number one movie of the year, Godzilla -1. This movie has absolutely everything that a film fan could possibly want. A broken protagonist who seeks redemption and a shot at heroism, memorable side characters who provide their own contributions and personal arcs, a deeply emotional story with heavy personal stakes, and, oh yeah, a giant monster that destroys cities with a single heat ray. Yeah, it's amazing how this manages to not just be a great Godzilla film, but a phenomenal movie that has Godzilla in it. I'm not super familiar with the Godzilla series as a whole, but I have seen a couple of the recent Americanized versions of him. These movies were okay, but seem to focus more on spectacle than story. And that's exactly where Godzilla -1 stands out. It has spectacle and story. You get so invested in every one of these characters that you're on the edge of your seat whenever Godzilla comes in and threatens their lives. And man, you feel it whenever Godzilla's on screen. Every step he takes leaves a disastrous impact, and his heat ray has never been more devastating. For a relatively small budget, they made him look terrifying. I'll never forget the scene when he chases our lead characters by swimming after their boat. What I also love about the characters in this movie is that they feel like real people. They have distinct personalities and dreams, and they're smart. Every decision the human characters make is logical, and I love the fact that it isn't the Japanese or US governments that battles Godzilla at the end, but a ragtag group of World War II soldiers who want to fight for themselves and their families, not just for their government. Shikishima, our main character, was a kamikaze pilot during World War II who ran out on his duties. He survives both the war and a Godzilla attack and deals with survivor's guilt, believing that death is the only way for him to claim his honor. His parents are dead from an air raid launched onto Tokyo, and he finds a young woman named Noriko and a baby that she'd been tasked with caring for by a dying stranger. None of them are related, but the three of them form a family, giving Shikishima a reason to live, as well as something to lose. During the final battle against Godzilla, the audience knows that he's been struggling with a dilemma. Does he become a kamikaze pilot to kill Godzilla and redeem himself? Or does he find honor in living and being there for his new family? The movie sets it up to where I wasn't sure what he might actually do. This gave an already intense battle even higher stakes. So there you have it. My top movie of 2023 didn't come from Hollywood, but from Japan. Now that you've heard my list, let's see yours. Let me know what your top 10 movies of 2023 were in the comments, and let me know why you liked them. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy my content, ring that notification bell. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you all have a good one.